The Staghound rolled through the wreckage of a city that had forgotten its own shape, its tyres biting into rubble as if daring the ground to give way beneath it. In those cramped, choking streets, it behaved like a wheeled battering ram with the manners of a staff car, hauling commanders and scouts forward when even tracked vehicles hesitated. Twin GMC engines pushed a 12-ton beast with a confidence crews trusted more than the road itself, and its power-assisted steering turned chaos into something that could be navigated rather than feared. It wasn't elegant, but it stayed planted when everything else slipped. To a tired crew, it felt like the only machine in Europe that refused to take no from the terrain, and in the ruins, that refusal mattered more than armour or speed. The early years of the war exposed a brutal truth. The Allies had plenty of wheels, yet not nearly enough machines that could take punishment while keeping reconnaissance moving at speed. Europe's expanding front lines demanded armoured cars that could travel far, resist small arms fire, and stay controllable on roads that were often little more than broken stone tracks. Until 1942, doctrine had leaned heavily on lighter vehicles which, though fast and nimble, shook themselves to pieces under sustained operations and lacked the endurance to range ahead of advancing formations. The British Army, in particular, found itself relying on stop-gap machines whose origins lay in peacetime policing rather than hard campaigning. From an engineer's chronicle perspective, three pressures converged at once. First, Allied reconnaissance needed vehicles with genuine cross-country stamina, not just quick road pace, but the ability to maintain traction, steering authority, and braking control over ground churned into ridges and pits by previous battles. Second, the move toward deeper, faster operational thrusts meant reconnaissance cars had to keep up with armoured divisions for days on end without long halts for repairs or servicing. Third, the growing threat of ambushes demanded armour thick enough to deflect heavy machine gun fire, while still allowing a long patrol radius that would dwarf previous designs. These demands weren't theoretical. They came directly from after-action reports, maintenance logs, and commanders complaining that their current equipment lacked the backbone for modern warfare. The American industry, already scaling up production capacity, saw an opportunity to design a car that would answer British needs while fitting US manufacturing principles. The requirement was ambitious: a powerful, well-armoured, long-range vehicle with a turreted gun, twin engines, and a communications suite robust enough for divisional reconnaissance. It needed to be built in quantity, serviced by global supply networks, and rugged enough to survive the harshest theatres from Italy to the Middle East. Only the Allies could look at these requirements and say, yes, we'll build a car that's basically a tank on four wheels, and we'll do it quickly. The Staghound was born from this urgency, a machine meant to solve a strategic shortfall rather than simply fill a slot in the catalogue. It entered the war not as an experiment, but as an answer to a widening gap that no other vehicle was yet capable of closing. Designing the Staghound required an entirely new way of thinking about what an armoured car should be. Instead of treating reconnaissance vehicles as lightly built scouts with a radio and a gun, the vision behind the T17E1 insisted that reconnaissance deserved real firepower, real endurance, and proper protection. American engineers at Chevrolet, working closely with British doctrinal planners, imagined a wheeled platform that combined the operational range of a truck with the battlefield survivability of a light tank. The guiding logic was simple. If reconnaissance was supposed to push deep, then it ought to survive deep. From a witness of progress viewpoint, diaries from liaison officers reveal a certain disbelief when the early sketches circulated. Many were used to small, two-man cars buzzing around at high speed. The idea of an armoured reconnaissance vehicle weighing over 12 tons, mounting a 37mm gun in a fully rotating turret, sounded suspiciously like mission creep. Yet doctrine was evolving, and the war's speed demanded machines that could gather information without forfeiting their crews in the process. That meant range, hundreds of miles between major services, combined with armour plate thick enough to offer real deflection against sustained fire and sufficient internal volume to house radios, ammunition, and a competent crew without forcing them to contort like circus performers. 3 technical innovations defined the Staghound's conceptual leap. First was the twin-engine layout, not merely for redundancy, but for torque distribution across long patrol distances, reducing strain on the drivetrain and keeping the vehicle mobile even after partial engine damage. Second was the inclusion of hydraulic power-assisted steering, extraordinarily forward-thinking for the early 1940s and essential for controlling such a heavy vehicle at reconnaissance speeds. Third was the emphasis on turreted firepower, something many earlier cars lacked entirely, because reconnaissance units increasingly needed to fight their way into and out of trouble rather than simply observe it. The competing proposals of the era, including lighter American and Canadian designs, pushed for simplicity and mass production, yet the mixed Anglo-American committee argued for capability first and production second. It was one of those rare wartime moments when the engineers got away with saying, "No, we're not making it smaller just to make it cheaper." The result was a vision of reconnaissance that matched the complexity of modern mobile warfare, a wheeled vehicle that could observe, communicate, and fight with enough authority to justify every bolt in its oversized frame. Factories in the United States were already operating at a relentless tempo when the Staghound rolled into production, but the T17E1 demanded a degree of precision and scale that pushed even seasoned assembly lines to adjust their rhythm. Building an armoured car that was effectively the size of a small tank meant reconfiguring jigs, tooling, and flow lines normally intended for trucks, while incorporating armoured hull work that required heavier presses and more specialised welding crews. The Staghound's hull sections were fabricated in robust steel plates before being transferred to welding bays, where each joint was layered in passes to prevent distortion across the long, flat panels typical of its design. From a mechanical sensory standpoint, the build process was a symphony of clatter, steel being stress-relieved under heat lamps, rivet guns hammering fastening points for turret rings, and the unmistakable thump of engines being craned into place. Each T17E1 carried twin GMC 270 engines, a choice that required duplicated mounting brackets, reinforced drivetrain couplings, and careful alignment to prevent torsional stresses from appearing once both power plants were running. Engineers established strict tolerances for crankshaft alignment and cooling hose clearance because the twin-engine arrangement generated substantial heat during sustained patrols, making airflow management as crucial as horsepower output. Even minor misalignment could cause belts to slip at speed or generate harmonics that shook the turret, a flaw unacceptable for a vehicle expected to fire accurately on the move. 3 distinct engineering challenges dominated the build phase. First was integrating the fully rotating turret, which housed the 37mm gun and coaxial Browning, onto a vehicle with a high hull profile, demanding a reinforced turret ring capable of handling recoil impulses across varied terrain. Second was the hydraulic power assist steering system, which required precisely machined pump housings and hoses resistant to heat and vibration far beyond those found in civilian applications. Third was the decision to incorporate a large internal fuel capacity, giving the Staghound an exceptional operational range, Manufacturing this required seam-welded tanks with strict leak test protocols, because any failure would have turned an armoured car into a rolling fire hazard. Despite wartime pressure, production lines retained an insistence on reliability and modular repair. Components were standardized whenever possible. Distributors, carburetors, and electrical systems matched those already used widely across American automotive industry lines, ensuring parts availability even far from supply hubs. The Staghound had so many automotive components in common with American lorries that mechanics joked they could have serviced it blindfolded, though none volunteered to try. These decisions reduced field breakdowns and simplified logistics, making the Staghound not just a battlefield machine but a maintainable one across far-flung theatres. Field trials for the Staghound began with an uncompromising premise. If this armoured car was meant to support reconnaissance at the edges of Allied operations, then it had to endure terrain that most vehicles survived only in short bursts. Test drivers pushed the T17E1 through rutted tracks, steep inclines, flint-strewn riverbeds, and mud so thick it could swallow a jeep to its headlights. The Staghound's long wheelbase, initially a point of concern, proved surprisingly stable, especially on slopes where its evenly distributed weight stopped it pitching forward the way lighter scout cars often did. Crews noted that despite the vehicle's size, its hydraulic power-assisted steering kept the wheel manageable, even after hours of continuous manoeuvring. In the immediacy of trials, narrated here as a strategist's record, the atmosphere was one of data rushing in as fast as the engines could turn. Heat build-up in the twin GMC power plants was monitored with meticulous attention. The design's twin-engine system gave the Staghound resilience, but it also demanded strict airflow and coolant balancing under field conditions. Engineers logged fuel consumption under varying load levels, confirming that the Staghound could maintain a significant operational radius even on uneven ground. Brake fade tests were equally harsh. Extended descents, repeated rapid stops, and cross-grain braking on gravel to simulate evasive manoeuvres under fire. 3 notable technical observations emerged from these trials. First, the turret's 37mm M6 gun demonstrated stable firing performance even when the vehicle was repositioning quickly, thanks to the broad stance that minimized sway across the hull's central axis. Second, the armour shielding, particularly the frontal plate, offered practical protection against sustained machine gun fire, validating its value in reconnaissance missions that increasingly involved close-quarter engagements. Third, the Staghound's high silhouette, often criticised in early design discussions, was found to offer improved visibility to commanders and gunners, though this benefit had to be weighed against the obvious increase in exposure. Crews reported that the vehicle handled predictably over broken terrain, with the suspension absorbing impacts that would have punished lighter vehicles into mechanical submission. Maintenance teams appreciated how accessible the twin engines were during checks, though some cautioned that the dual setup demanded stricter discipline in synchronized servicing. One mechanic muttered that while the Staghound rarely complained, when it did, it expected the attention of a small orchestra rather than a single fiddler. Performance under trial conditions built confidence, proving that the Staghound could endure the stresses of frontline reconnaissance rather than merely survive them. When the Staghound finally entered operational service, its success hinged on whether it could deliver meaningful reconnaissance capability rather than simply appear impressive on paper. In the field, its performance offered a mixture of breakthroughs and recognized limits, each shaped by the environments it entered. In Italy, its long-range, sturdy suspension and reliable twin engines made it invaluable on mountain roads and in the rolling countryside, where reconnaissance units had to cover enormous distances without consistent logistical support. Crews admired its ability to sustain patrols well beyond the limits of lighter armoured cars, and its armour proved thick enough to shrug off heavy automatic fire that would have crippled more fragile vehicles. Operational reports, interpreted here from an institutional perspective, show how the Staghound excelled in support of command posts and headquarters reconnaissance. Its roomy interior, though often described as cramped by modern standards, was spacious compared to earlier cars, allowing better radio operation and easier weapon handling. The 37mm gun, though not a tank killer, was potent enough against enemy positions and soft-skinned vehicles, giving the Staghound a respectable bite in unexpected firefights. Its ability to remain mechanically stable during long road marches became especially valuable as the war intensified, and commanders needed dependable vehicles that didn't require constant pit-stop maintenance. 3 major consequences shaped its reputation. First, its impressive mobility allowed reconnaissance elements to stay ahead of advancing formations in northwest Europe, ensuring commanders received timely intelligence during rapid breakthroughs. Second, its weight, considered excessive early in design, proved a double-edged sword. While it offered stability and armour, it limited cross-country agility in soft soils, occasionally leaving the Staghound bogged down where lighter cars skimmed through. Third, the complexity of its twin-engine system, though reliable, demanded maintenance training above the level expected for ordinary armoured cars. Units that invested in proper servicing reaped consistent performance, while others found themselves wrestling with preventable issues. The Staghound's operational story is therefore neither pure success nor failure, but a vehicle whose strengths aligned perfectly with certain theatres, while revealing constraints in others. Crews valued its protection and speed on roads, commanders valued its endurance, and mechanics appreciated, albeit sometimes begrudgingly, its robust automotive lineage. One officer quipped that the Staghound was marvellous, provided you treat it like a gentleman who occasionally refuses to walk on grass. Its role in the war became defined by this blend of capability and character, delivering breakthroughs where terrain and doctrine worked in its favour, and showing its limits where the mud proved deeper than its ambitions. The Staghound's influence extended far beyond the immediate performance of its steel and rubber, leaving a quieter imprint on logistics, politics, and post-liberation civil dynamics. As Allied forces advanced across Europe and the Mediterranean, the presence of such a large, well-equipped armoured car signalled not just military capability, but a form of authority that shaped local reactions in unexpected ways. In liberated towns, civilians saw the Staghound as more than a reconnaissance vehicle. It became a rolling symbol of restored structure, its distinctive silhouette appearing in newsreels, victory marches, and street celebrations. Its bulk and turreted confidence created impressions disproportionate to its formal role. In this act's meta-real lens, the Staghound influenced the perception of Allied reach and reliability more deeply than its designers ever intended. While its primary duty was intelligence gathering, its secondary effect was psychological, both reassuring to liberated populations and quietly intimidating to any lingering collaborators or hostile remnants. The sight of an armoured car capable of long-range independent patrols reinforced the narrative that Allied control was spreading steadily, backed by machines that could stay on the road long after supply lines moved elsewhere. This mattered in regions where political stability was fragile, and where the mere presence of a self-sustaining armoured patrol could tilt local sentiment. 3 wider consequences emerged from this presence. First, the Staghound's extensive post-combat use in civil and military policing across Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa showed how adaptable the design proved in maintaining public order. Second, its operational independence, thanks to long-range and robust automotive components, allowed units to monitor wide areas, inadvertently accelerating post-liberation reorganization by giving authorities eyes, wheels and firepower in one package. Third, its relatively comfortable interior, large for its class, made it attractive to commanders who repurposed it for duties ranging from liaison missions to political escort, embedding the vehicle in administrative and diplomatic functions that seldom appear in operational histories. These secondary roles had real political weight. The Staghound became a tool for projecting authority, creating order, and binding newly liberated regions back into functioning governance structures. Its reliability and silhouette infused civilians with confidence that the Allied presence was not just passing through, but committed to holding ground and rebuilding. This unintended symbolic power became part of the vehicle's quiet legacy, shaping the post-war transition as much as it had shaped wartime reconnaissance. The Staghound's post-war career demonstrated how a machine built for one conflict can evolve into a tool for entirely different struggles and administrations. When the guns fell silent in Europe, the T17E1 did not fade away. Instead, it migrated into the arsenals of numerous nations whose territories, politics, and security concerns varied wildly. From European capitals reorganizing their defense structures to Middle Eastern states securing newly established borders, the Staghound found roles shaped more by geopolitics than by battlefield maneuver. Its durability and ease of maintenance, qualities baked into its wartime design, made it especially attractive to countries lacking heavy industrial infrastructure. Through a visual legacy lens, one can trace the Staghound's influence along a path of evolving doctrine. In Rhodesia, for instance, it served in internal security roles, where its mobility and turreted firepower provided officers with a versatile, if aging, platform. Across Europe, surviving Staghounds appeared in ceremonial duties, military parades, and national celebrations, offering a visual reminder of Allied liberation, without falling into any museum clichés. In the Netherlands, the vehicle was incorporated into formal displays, where its silhouette echoed a wartime resolve that resonated with the public. The Staghound was not a relic, but part of an ongoing narrative about national identity and the mechanized support that had helped restore it. Three legacy threads show how the Staghound shaped post-war engineering. First, its twin-engine layout influenced later considerations about redundancy in long-range patrol vehicles, even if the exact arrangement was seldom copied. Second, its power-assisted steering prefigured post-war moves toward ergonomic improvements in armor design, subtly nudging engineers to prioritize crew handling in large wheeled vehicles. Third, its robust automotive foundation, rooted in truck engineering, demonstrated that a successful armoured car did not need exotic components to perform efficiently, encouraging future designers to leverage commercial parts for military resilience. Staghounds today, when encountered in restored condition or in archival footage, serve as a bridge between the chaos of wartime reconnaissance and the shifting geopolitical tensions of the mid-20th century. Their use in ceremonies reflects not nostalgia, but a continuation of their practical post-war identity as machines that once secured streets, borders, and political transitions. Its legacy persists in the design philosophies of modern armoured cars that echo its emphasis on endurance, reliability, and crew-focused engineering. Looking back across the fractured landscapes where the Staghound first carved its path, one realizes how much of its reputation rests not on dramatic charges, but on the quiet reliability it offered in moments when the environment itself seemed intent on halting progress. The streets, bridges, and battered roads of Europe, those same settings glimpsed in the opening frames, were the proving grounds that defined what a wheeled armoured vehicle could truly achieve. The Staghound answered these demands with a calm mechanical confidence, its twin engines humming through dust, sleet and broken masonry, as if the war's obstacles were simply another set of variables in an engineer's equation. It embodied a particular wartime attitude: advance even when the ground tells you not to. In this closing reflection, the Staghound's enduring value emerges as a lesson in design balance rather than brute force. Its weight, once criticised, contributed to the stability that gave reconnaissance crews a fighting chance in ambush-prone environments. Its long operational range changed what commanders expected from wheeled armour, pushing reconnaissance further forward without sacrificing communication or firepower. Its steering system, so modern for its era, proved that ergonomics and crew fatigue were concerns worth engineering around even under wartime pressure. These traits were not glamorous, yet they influenced post-war design thinking in subtle ways that still echo in present-day doctrine about survivable, self-sufficient patrol vehicles. Three final observations anchor the Staghound's place in the wider story of military innovation. First, it demonstrated that combining commercial automotive practice with military requirements could produce machines that were both tough and maintainable, reminding engineers that complexity must always serve function. Second, it showed that reconnaissance vehicles benefit from protection and endurance equal to that of frontline armour, helping shift doctrine toward more resilient scouting formations. Third, it illustrated how a machine's psychological presence can shape outcomes. Civilians and soldiers alike responded to the Staghound not just as hardware, but as a symbol of continuity in environments where certainty was scarce. And so, when viewed through the long lens of history, the Staghound stands as a reminder that progress in warfare often comes from vehicles that refuse to be limited by narrow expectations. It was, in its own dry way, the armoured car that looked at every ruined road and insisted it could probably manage one more mile. Its influence remains woven into the lineage of modern reconnaissance doctrine and the ongoing pursuit of vehicles that balance endurance, protection, and practicality with measured precision. The Staghound's story ends not with spectacle, but with the steady assurance of a machine that did exactly what it was built to do and proved its worth across landscapes shaped by conflict.